Alright lads, and welcome back to another thrilling adventure in Yorkshire history. For the second time on this channel, I, as a non-beer drinker, will be immersing myself in the world of beer for your enjoyment. I'll be attempting to brew a mild country ale from a 100-year-old recipe as found in this 1979 Yorkshire recipe book. Now, the provenance of the recipe is given as being from an early Halifax naturalist, which suggests that this was intended as a home brewing recipe. That's also supported by the rather sparse ingredient list and the fact that the instructions are only 3 lines long. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. For the ingredients you will need 4 to 5 litres of water, which I've got in a bucket down there, 25 grams of hops, and at this point there'll be a homebrew hipster going, "Oh, well, actually the alpha acid levels are too low." Alright sunshine, I neither drink beer nor brew it on the regular, this is just for your entertainment. A tablespoon of yeast, which I've got here, and 225 grams of brown sugar. If the alcohol poisoning doesn't kill you, then the diabetes from this will. Those of you who are into beer or brewing may be curious as to why there are no grains. Well, don't ask me, I don't know either. It's just what the recipe says. As I do not have a vat in which I can brew 5 litres worth, I'm going to use half the recipe so it's a little bit easier to make. Okay, so we first need to boil the hops for 30 minutes in the water, so I'm putting these in 2.5 litres of water. Whilst I'm waiting for them to boil, let's talk a bit about history. So we tend to think of home brewing as being a bit of a hipster thing, but it actually has a long history. Before the Industrial Revolution, when you had big brewing companies like Tetley's or Guinness or Heineken, brewing was basically done in the home. It was viewed in the same way as bread making. In fact, one of the main jobs for women was brewing. So for example, at the SEMA Fair in Scarborough, anyone was allowed to open their house as a pub essentially if they hung a tree branch over the door. Reportedly, as many as 20 houses would be brewing their own beer and selling it at the fair. So whilst I'm waiting for that to finish boiling, the next step calls for me to strain the mixture onto the sugar. Now when this was made 100 years ago, they probably would have used a fine cloth like muslin or linen, similar to what you'd use to make cheese with. But as I don't have any handy, I'm just using a sieve with some kitchen towel in. Okay, we're going to attempt to strain it onto the sugar. Let's hope I don't drop it all over the kitchen floor. Oops, already did for a little bit. So as you can see, it's looking a little bit like a dog's breakfast at the minute, but hopefully it'll taste a bit better than it looks. Now I've got to wait until it's lukewarm to add the yeast, because as you can see it's steaming away. Okay, so that's cooled down a little bit. Now the recipe calls for a tablespoon of yeast, but as I'm doing half, I'm adding a teaspoon. I think that's half. It'll do anyway. Okay, so it says I've got to let it work for 4 days, which just means leave it and let it brew. So I'm going to stick the lid on, come back in 4 days, and then bottle it.
Several days later.
I've retreated into my writing shed in the garden, like George Bernard Shaw, which is why you can hear the sounds of construction outside. And in the 4 days that this has been fermenting, I've given it a few sniffs, and let me tell you, it done half whiff. It pongs, it stinks, this is vile, right? This is pure rancid hop water. Unfortunately, there's not that much of it, so I only have to decant it into 1 bottle. But anyway, let's try it, and I'm going to show you what this is like, because this is, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Right, I'm going to attempt to decant it now. Oops, and I've got it all over the shed. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to clean all this up. Oh, no. Whoops. I need a tea towel. Never a dull moment with me. So, here we have one bottle of my old country ale. Now, I'm actually surprised by the fact that it's got a head, because whilst it was fermenting, it looked completely flat. Now, as I remind you, I don't drink beer, I drink cider. So I know I am going to find this disgusting. I'm going to make my dad try it later because he drinks more beer, but it smells a little bit like beer, but it's more like damp leaves a little bit. Actually, I'm going to pour this into a glass. Okay, rancid mango juice going in. Ooh, it's very, very bitter. Extremely bitter. It's far more bitter than your normal beer. Maybe some people like that, but the bitterness is really taking me back. But other than that, it doesn't actually taste too bad. I mean, I wouldn't drink this because it is so bitter, but otherwise it does actually taste like alcohol. So I suppose if you're a farmer 100 years ago, this will get the job done. So now I'm going to get my dad to try it, see what he thinks.
Well, it's definitely got the taste of beer and ale. Yeah, it's quite nice.
So in conclusion, I honestly thought that this was going to be an unmitigated disaster, considering I had never brewed anything before and the recipe had like 3 ingredients. But to my surprise, my dad really enjoyed drinking it, so it shows that actually it's not that bad or difficult. In the days before huge breweries, this is probably the type of ale that ordinary people would drink in their houses, made in their houses, and shared among the community. So this has been a really interesting and exciting project in bringing historical recipes to life. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, I hope you've learned something new, and hope to see you again soon.